the reality of the matter is that even with my expectations, for the record, even with my expectations from Bernie, which is much higher than like the average American politician, you know, because he's supposed to be the guy that gets it.
Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my questions are going to be addressed to all five. We have 5 experts on anti-Semitism, and I look forward to taking advantage of their knowledge. This is not the Foreign Relations Committee, so we're not here to debate the wisdom or lack of wisdom of what the Netanyahu government is doing. But the reality is that 92% of the housing units in Gaza have been destroyed. Most hospitals and primary healthcare facilities have been bombed. Civilian infrastructure has been devastated. 50,000 people, mostly women and children, have been killed. Over 100,000 have been wounded. If I or any other member of this committee makes that point, that we think, and again, I don't want to debate the policies right now, but if we think that the United States should not be supplying more bombs and artillery to the Netanyahu government, do you think, I don't want the debate on Israel, do you think that is anti-Semitic? Briefly, Ms. Gamble, start it and go right down the line. Am I being anti-Semitic if I say that the United States taxpayers should not supply more weapons to Israel?
That statement alone is not anti-Semitic. It does not attack Jewish.
Oops, he accidentally said to Israel. I think, so here's the thing. No. Always a Netanyahu government, right? He did say Israel at the end. And I think the reason why, maybe I'm wrong on this, maybe this is copium. I think there is two wolves inside of Bernie as well on this issue. There's the young boy who thought Israel was a socialist project at the kibbutzim, okay, who thinks that there is a vision for Israel that never existed and will never exist. Both of the wolves are gay, by the way. Okay? They're both gay, and they're having sex. They're having gays with one another. They're kissing. The gay wolves inside of Bernie Sanders are making out with one another. But I think the reason why he does this kind of rhetoric is twofold. I don't know. I don't know exactly which side I lean on. It could either be out of trying to maintain a level of pragmatism, which I think is stupid and wrong for the record, or it's because October 7th broke his brain a little bit. Because I think Bernie Sanders, unironically, was way harder on Israel in the past, even though there have been moments where he's been entirely too defensive of Israel in ways that I would never expect from someone who has not been shy about promoting like radical socialist movements around the world, you know? But I think as a 83-year-old man, I think like October 7th scared him straight up. And I don't think it's appropriate. I understand why, but this is like his rhetoric post October 7 is far different than the smoke that he had for Israel across the board as a prominent Jewish American politician on the fucking main stage running for president. Like, until Bernie Sanders, the only people that had ever even suggested or lightly hinted at removing our intractable allegiance to Israel were fucking anti-Semites on the right. Okay? I had not seen, like, with the exception of like Gravel and other like foreign policy, somewhat like crank adjacent politicians, there's rarely ever been like a prominent leader in the Democratic Party, especially in contemporary American politics in the last 30, 40 years, especially after 9/11 even, where, no, Nina Turner doesn't count, dude. I'm talking about a dude who almost became the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party, okay? I love Nina Turner, but this is not comparable, okay? We're talking about a dude who was running to be the candidate for the Democratic Party, and he was running on the issues, when it came to foreign policy, he was running on, we're going to deny funds to Israel. Like, that's insane. That's precisely the reason why I was so disappointed with Bernie Sanders in the aftermath of October 7, where he allowed himself likes of AOC And of course, understandably by Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, but even AOC called it a genocide before Bernie ever did. And I'm not even sure if he has ever called it a genocide. But the reality of the matter is that even with my expectations, for the record, even with my expectations from Bernie, which is much higher than like the average American politician, you know, because he's supposed to be the guy that gets it, okay? He has certainly fallen short of what is necessary from someone of his position. Yeah, Bernie Sanders' latest criticism of Israel signals an actual debate coming in 2020. Speaking at the annual J Street conference, Senator Bernie Sanders once again condemned recent Israeli attacks on nonviolent protests. But again, I think he is a J Street liberal Zionist. That's what Bernie Sanders is. I think that's what the situation is. That's what I think. This is the one issue with Bernie Sanders where I think that him and I do not, like, I can't even understand where he's coming from. Is J Street a two-state organization? Yes. J Street is interesting because a lot of the anti-Zionists that you know and love initially came from J Street. It's like the one step before. It's like Austin coming out as first and then dipping his toes into full-blown. A lot of Jews that are very progressive and very progressive on Palestine will start off at J Street like Simone Zimmerman and like Noah Culwin, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, I just, maybe two-state, and then they will usually be like, okay, I'm anti-Zionist, this shit sucks. You're just dipping your toes in the water a little bit. Now, obviously, no, please don't help by erasure. No, I'm not doing by erasure, but it's like, come on, can I make a joke? That's why I said Austin specifically who did that, okay? Calm down. You can men and women. You're both bitchless and bitchless, okay? Imagine being cool and not even being able to get laid by dick or pussy. Double L, okay? Sanders, speaking at the National Conference of Middle East Advocacy Group, J Street, Washington, D.C., called on the U.S. to adopt a more balanced policy towards Israel, Palestine, and condemn recent Israeli attacks on nonviolent protesters, called for an alleviation of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and even threw in some harsh words for Arab autocrats who express concern for Palestinians but don't put their money where their mouth is. Sanders may be veering away from the establishment line, but he's still far from being an ally many Palestinians look for in U.S. policymakers. He opposes the boycott. Yeah, he opposes BDS. But you know who else used to oppose BDS? Norm Finkelstein. That's right. So just remember that. And you know who else also is kind of critical and maybe oppositional to BDS? Dr. Ofer Kasif. So just remember that, okay? That's why I don't discard allies for differences in opinion like that. Yeah, bet you didn't know that. Those who've been at this game for a very long time know none of those are Palestinians. Yeah, you know why? Because we're talking about people in the United States of America, okay? Yes, I know. We're talking about edge cases here. We're talking about American Jews in general, okay? I know. Every single person I brought up is either an Israeli Jewish person or an American Jew. And also, their points have changed as well. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, Norm did not oppose BDS because of the Zionism. He was very much about the tactics. No, I know. Why are you telling me this? I know. No, and it's not even that. It's because Norm is a two-stater, and I don't even know if he still is, but he was a two-state solutioner, and he thought that he did the... I feel like it's shameful to bring this up when talking about Norm, especially because there's so many people who now are the most radical on Palestine because they learned about it since October 7, and now they're going to go yell at him or some shit. But this is a long story. I don't want to get into it, okay? Don't worry about it.
Well, Israel wants a two-state solution, but, well, it used to. It used to, now it doesn't. But it was never along the terms on what the international community had agreed on. The terms were very straightforward, not complicated at all. You can read those terms in the International Court of Justice advisory opinion.
Is he still? I don't even know if he's still a two-stater, but but ultimately it doesn't matter. And the same reason for Ofer Kasif. Like there is some level of I think fear that people have. You know, it is what it is. I mean, I think Norm's opposition to BDS was that it was too antagonistic, which ironically enough, I used to believe in a two-state solution, but I was always a firm, committed supporter of boycott, divestments, and sanctions. People change. People's attitudes change. People's reflection and people's understanding of situations change. Now, of course, when you're 83 fucking years old like Bernie is, it's a lot more difficult. Okay? I'm not telling you all this because I'm saying Bernie Sanders is like an unconditional ally. But anyway, because I think BDS is important. Chomsky agrees because BDS is ineffective to Israel and pressure needs to be put on the U.S. No, BDS is to put pressure on companies that are American companies for the most part that are operating in Israel. It is to try and create a pressure valve in the same fucking way that apartheid South Africa did. I don't want to have this argument over and over again. Okay, guys, please just let's continue. Fear, aka Islamophobia, a little bit for sure. Norm also talked about his perspective on the usefulness of peaceful protests by Palestinians changed after the March of Return. Yeah. Ofer Kaz's position comes from the CPI line, which is two-state, which comes mostly from the Palestinian comrades in the party. He also explains through Leninism why it's the correct approach. Attended a talk where he explained this. Yeah, Adidas was taken off the BDS. No, not Adidas. Puma was taken off the BDS list because they stopped sponsoring the Israeli soccer team. And I think BDS has been successful. Anyway, let's continue. Bernie, including the expansion of settlements, Sanders has also consistently voted in favor of U.S. military aid to Israel. This is obviously a fucking massive point of contention that I think is incredibly valid from everyone that criticizes this. The U.S. gives billions of dollars in military aid to Israel every year and generally shields the country from accountability at the UN. But in a political system where mainstream politicians of both major parties usually shy away from any vocal criticism of Israeli human rights abuses, the fact that a leading presidential contender and a member of the Senate Democratic leadership is willing to do so is noteworthy and a sign that the debate in the U.S. is shifting. To oppose the reactionary policies of Benjamin Netanyahu does not make us anti-Israel, Sanders said. So this right here is his position. He is a liberal Zionist who believes that Benjamin Netanyahu is bad, who believes that Israel is a right-wing country, mind you. Like, I don't think he doesn't think that Israel is not like an incredibly right-wing country, but it's idealistic to assume that it would be anything other than that, because if you don't re-examine the inception of a violent settler colonial enterprise and the continuation of an apartheid on some terms that are going to make you feel bad, you're always going to be idealistic. This inherently is anti-materialist, which is another reason why I find it strange when Bernie Sanders, a person who is supposed to be a socialist, doesn't recognize it on those terms. This is the same principle behind my criticisms of like the 2018 era protests that took place in Israel, where they were talking about the constitutional overturn and how frustrated people were. How frustrated liberal Zionists were inside of Israel about how, Israeli society was becoming more right-wing. They were flying the Israeli flags at those protests, going, this is not us, this is not representative of us. And it was interesting because it absolutely was. It absolutely was representative. If you don't examine that inherent contradiction, if you don't actually reassess how much of a role settler colonialism and the maintenance of an apartheid plays in the development and the continuation of your society, then you will never understand why the Itamar Ben-Gvirs and the fucking Bezalel Smotriches are rising to power. That's it. That's the problem. It is because of that inherently right-wing, inherently reactionary, and racist value that is at the heart of the inception of the Israeli state, and a lack of interest in re-examining that from many Israeli Jews. That is the reason why Israel has become even more right-wing over time and even more reactionary over time. It's that simple. This is one of the main reasons why I'm always skeptical of those who say Israeli society is on the brink of collapse and tearing itself apart. Israeli institutions from top to bottom are collectively committed to the mission of ethnic cleansing and genocide of Palestinians. After a full year, the petition submitted on March 2024, Israel's Supreme Court rejects appeal to allow humanitarian aid to Gaza, claiming inter alia that the IDF and the respondents went above and beyond to enable the provision of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. This devotion to Palestinian erasure is explicitly baked into Israeli law and national narratives and is necessarily a precondition of Zionism as a Jewish ethnocracy in its current location. It is the glue that will always hold Israeli society together. Yeah. So no, I don't think it's more so that Bernie Sanders at times have been incredibly critical of Israel being a right-wing institution, a right-wing enterprise, a right-wing nation, is at odds with his liberal Zionist position, because Bernie Sanders, much like many liberal Zionist Jews in Israel, refuses to recognize the inherent flaw in the development of the nation state. The fundamentals of Zionism implies Jewish ethno-religious supremacy. That's what it is. So saying you're a liberal Zionist is like saying you're a liberal Nazi. The Nazi in that situation, because they're both fascist ethno-supremacist ideologies that engage in expansionist agendas and erasure of the lower class, the lower ethnic class. Ultimately, if you can't recognize that, then you will always fall short of what's necessary to resolve the inherent contradiction, fall short of what is necessary to abolish the occupation and to destroy the apartheid. Okay? I think that's what it is. That's at the heart of the problem. Why didn't you say this to him? Because I had 9 minutes, brother. If you think that this was going to be an impactful moment right before he goes up on a rally, for me to be able to have a theoretical conversation with someone who I admire, by the way, still, regardless of this position, okay, you are a delusional person. This is why, if I were to have this conversation with Rashida Tlaib, it would be very different than having this conversation with Bernie Sanders. Because Bernie Sanders, in the space that he occupies and the beliefs that he holds close to his heart, still have an interest in defending the First Amendment. That's precisely the reason why, if you watch the interview that I had with him closely, you will hear me broach the subject of Israel, not on defending Palestinian lives or the morality of Israel being a Jewish ethno-state built around Jewish ethno-supremacist values, but instead on the boundaries of defending the First Amendment in the United States of America and allowing people to criticize Israel. Many of those people who are protesting against Israel are Bernie Sanders supporters themselves. You're a shallow dope of a man that you used to be. I know. The calculation here is simple. Are you better off with no one with a position of prominence in American politics advocating for similar values and, in moments of defense, advocating for the freedom to protest against Israel? Or are you better off with those people actually actively mobilizing the massive amounts of people that they've been able to capture the attention of against the current administration, who is taking significant action against the First Amendment and due process? That's the question. If you think personally that you got a different method and you got a different vision for instilling class consciousness among the American working class, if you think that you have a different approach, I'll hear you out. But my naysayers have yet to bring up a different approach. As a matter of fact, they have no approach. Their only approach is coming in here and typing up a storm against me. Someone that they don't even fucking disagree with on both my examination of Bernie Sanders' liberal Zionism or even like what must be done. So that's it. If all you have is moral grandstanding against a fucking Twitch streamer, then you got nothing. If the environment in American politics had moved in a direction where there was mass mobilization and politicians were actively, like most politicians that moved towards the liberal Zionist position, then I would be advocating for politicians like Bernie Sanders, who are at the edge of that, at the cutting edge of that, to move beyond the liberal Zionist position. I'd be demanding more. But right now, the 99% of Congress is ultra-Zionist. And if 99% of Congress is ultra-Zionist, I'm not going to yell at a couple of the politicians that have, like, even on the optics front, put their names out there to say, we got to stop giving weapons to Israel. It's that simple. That's it. It's no different than me saying, read the fucking room and be normal. Okay? Does this mean that I'm not disappointed or want more from Bernie Sanders? Of course. But it is not an accident that most people who focus most of their effort and criticism against Bernie Sanders are fucking anonymous people online. There's a reason for that. I see politicians as public servants, what they're supposed to be. Politicians are supposed to represent the interests of their constituents. They're leaders as well, okay? But yes, this chatter is correct. Don't punish the behaviors you want to see. I want more politicians to have Bernie Sanders' opinion, and I want more politicians to go beyond that. But before more politicians have even Bernie Sanders' opinion, in an environment where none of them, they don't even think it's like questionable to have that. Like, they don't even think it's something that's debatable. Yeah, I'm not going to fucking yell at the one guy who is further to the fucking, closer to the progressive position on this than anybody else. Please watch Jewish journalist exposes Israel's darkest secret. Dude, I'm not going to watch that video. Okay? But I know Israel's always been far right. Yes, you can't be a fucking progressive country if you're built on, I mean, look at America. Look at Australia. But especially look at America. America is a settler colonial enterprise built on top of continuing slavery, chattel slavery. Okay? Continued far longer than the European contemporaries did. The fuck? Yes, I know. I know that. Where the fuck is the article that I was reading? God damn it. Anyway, he first spoke at J Street's national conference last year, using that address to applaud the Obama administration for refusing to veto a UN Security Council resolution that was critical of Israel's settlements. Applaud? Wait, what? Using that address to applaud the Obama administration for refusing to veto, for not vetoing a UN Security Council resolution, and to encourage a more balanced policy in the Middle East. J Street is an organization that seeks to change the U.S. conversation on Israel and Palestine by organizing within the American Jewish community. It has courted a number of federal politicians to advocate for a two-state solution, but it is far less influential than the hawkish American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC. What's really ironic about J Street is that J Street does something, and this is why I don't like shit on J Street too much. Okay? J Street does something where they take American politicians to the West Bank to show them the apartheid. Okay? And I think what's really funny about that process is when you especially get like a black politician, unless they're fucking Richie Torres, to visit, like Jamal Bowman, to visit the West Bank, they don't come back thinking, oh yeah, let's do a two-state solution, actually. They come back thinking, we must dismantle the Zionist entity piece by piece. Because especially if you have that in your history and you see it in practice in broad daylight with American weapons and with the American go-ahead, you go, oh my God, this is what I read in textbooks. This is what my grandparents told me was fucking going on, and even worse than that, actually. That's what happened in Ta-Nehisi Coates as well. So while J Street's agenda overall is to maintain a more peaceful approach to Israel coexisting with a two-state solution or whatever, and a lot of people, myself included, obviously think that that is untenable and impossible to contend with, and it will never happen, especially because 750,000 settlers live in the West Bank now. Okay, I'm not going to fucking get mad at an organization that naively thinks that, this could happen and then ends up accidentally showing the reality to a bunch of Americans who are fucking oblivious. Ta-Nehisi Coates is a great example of this, an incredibly well-read person. Okay, think about that. This man is an academic, a journalist who has reached the highest praise, and he had no fucking clue. He wrote for The Atlantic, and he was like, I did not know what the fuck was up. The delusion and the, especially pre-October 7, the delusion that many Westerners have towards the situation in Israel is propped up by billions of dollars over the course of many, many decades of Hasbara and like endless sea of misinformation. Like, of course, Americans who can't see anything beyond what's immediately in front of them are not going to realize the situation. That's why I have some semblance of charity. Now, this is, I say, pre-October 7, because post-October 7, a lot of people found out very quickly. Sanders' appearance at J Street was significant in a number of ways. The fact that a popular national politician appeared 2 years in a row at the conference helped bring a national spotlight to the relatively niche organization. And considering that Sanders is leading contender for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination, his appearance may be a sign that the party could be forced to take a slightly more pro-Palestinian posture moving forward. They did not. They became significantly more right-wing. Presidential candidates typically tell carefully to criticize Israeli human rights abuses and instead heaping blame on Palestinian leadership. Typically, U.S. politicians who criticize Israel's treatment of Palestinians are marginalized. Sanders, on the other hand, is now chair of the outreach for the Senate Democrats and is willing to adopt these positions even outside the context of a presidential race. He's organizing his own colleagues in the Senate to sign on to a letter urging the Trump administration to address the Gaza humanitarian crisis, and his popularity from 2016 is virtually unchanged. This may be partly a result of the fact that the Democratic Party's constituent base is evolving as well. A recent survey from the Pew Research Center showed that Democrats are almost as likely to be sympathetic to Palestinians as they are to Israelis. This was on April 17th, 2018. Okay? Just so you understand. I think one of the big turning points for this conversation in the Western world, specifically in the United States of America, and it's important to have this conversation within the confines of the United States of America for all of those who may be tuning in from fucking Argentina, for example, is because we fund this entire genocide. We fund this entire apartheid ethno-state. We find this entire genocidal apartheid ethno-state project to be of benefit to our State Department and to the agendas, to our agenda in the Middle East. I need you to understand something, okay? Like, let's say you're fucking outside of the United States of America. You have to get Americans on board. That's why I can't fucking talk like, I'm a goddamn radical. That's why I have to be, one, more careful about what I say, and two, make sure that I, am speaking to people who are completely oblivious to the fucking realities. Okay? Why do I have to do that? Because you have to get enough Americans on board to go out and fucking protest so that then you can get enough American politicians on board. That's how it works. It takes a very long time, okay? That's why I'm a massive advocate for boycott, divestments, and sanctions on the state of Israel specifically, because making Israel out to be a pariah for the crime of genocide and apartheid is incredibly important, because if Israel is seen as a pariah by Western nations, which it is already happening, that's, no matter how hard I push, I can't change that dynamic at all in the way that Israel can by just live streaming its fucking genocide. But yeah, you got to make it so that Americans are not being deported for protesting against Israel. And you have to make it so that people are willing and able to protest against Israel, protest politicians so that they are against Israel, and protest organizations so they cut ties, financial ties to Israel, a process that takes a very long time, but it's basically the only tool we have at our disposal. Maybe not the only tool, there's others as well, but this is my advocacy within the confines of being a broadcaster on a broadcaster of prominence on a platform, especially as people are constantly fucking hounding me and looking to deplatform me for things I'm not even saying. Okay? Anyway, I understand that the Netanyahu government is trying to make all this about Hamas in order to delegitimize any opposition to blockade and occupation. The presence of Hamas members among a crowd of tens of thousands does not justify the violence that we saw, and frankly, it is amazing to me that anyone will find that point of view controversial. Sanders used the platform to explain some of the congressional action he's encouraged. More settlements will not bring peace. Demolishing Palestinian homes and villages will not bring peace. Last year, some of you may know, I wrote a letter to Prime Minister Netanyahu along some of my 9 colleagues protesting deeply inhumane policy of demolishing Palestinian villages. When it came to Arab autocrats' response to the situation in Palestine, Sanders did not mince words. He pointed to $50 million donation from the Saudis to UNRWA, the UN agency that assists Palestinian refugees. Let us not forget that it's 10% of what the Crown Prince paid for his yacht, referencing a $500 million yacht that Mohammed bin Salman bought in France. His message to autocrats like the Crown Prince was simple. What I say to the Crown Prince and other multi-billionaire leaders in the region, stop talking about poverty and misery in Gaza. Do something about it. Yeah, he's like, get some nukes. It's time. That's what he was saying. Mohammed, it's time to use those American weapons to invade Tel Aviv. You must restore the Islamic Caliphate right on top of what was formerly known as Judea and Samaria, but what will now be known as the new Mecca. That's what he was saying. Yeah, do something about it. From most of the conference attendees, many of whom trended younger, Sanders to the rock stars welcome. Bernie really speaks for the students. Sanders does not even read. Okay, whatever. For instance, when the then Senator Barack Obama was running for Senate, he told a group of activists in 2007 that nobody is suffering more than the Palestinian people. When his campaign is pressed for comment, they quickly clarify by blaming Hamas and not Israel for that suffering. Salafist Bernie is best Bernie. Yeah. Tommy Vitor. Senator Obama, friend of the show, Tommy Vitor says, Senator Obama has always said the security of Israel should be America's starting point in the Middle East. As he stated in his speech at AIPAC and again in Iowa, he also believes that in the end, the Palestinian people are suffering from the Hamas-led government's refusal to renounce terrorism and join as a real partner in the peace process. God, we don't deserve anything. I do legitimately think, Trump is the least of what we deserve as Americans for all of the crimes that we continue and contribute to the world, for all the pain that we contribute to the fucking world. Like, Jesus Christ, when I see stuff like this, I'm like, I become JD Pond myself. Sanders' position is markedly different. Though he has not yet embraced the ultimate progressive call, namely threatening the U.S. military aid to Israel, he is not timid in his frequent and loud criticisms of Israel. By the way, he has actually said this now. He has said this. While he was using his position as the prominent mayor of Burlington to lobby Vermont's voters to back Jesse Jackson's insurgent bid in the Democratic presidential nominee, he condemned Israeli violence against Palestinian protesters, and even entertained the notion of cutting off arms transfers in response. He was a lot more radical back then, for the record. But since being elected to Congress, Sanders has been a reliable vote for U.S. military aid to Israel and has rarely dissented from bipartisan support for Israel's government. He offered a qualified defense of Israel's bombardment of Gaza in 2014, angering his own constituents at Rowdy Town Hall. He's also continued to oppose BDS campaign. That's the famous clip that every fucking anti-Bernie, anti-Zionist loves showing. He has also continued to oppose the BDS campaign that seeks to use economic pressure to force Israel to respect the rights of Palestinians. More recently, Sanders signed on to a congressional letter last year that condemned BDS. Since then, he has also literally said that anti-BDS laws are a violation of the First Amendment. So once again, he has gone back and forth, hot and cold on Israel, over and over again. Still, his 2016 presidential campaign brought with it a change. He courted Palestinian and Arab Americans, brought on surrogates like Linda Sarsour. He sought foreign policy advice from Arab American Institute head Jim Zogby and J Street head Jeremy Ben-Ami. He declined to address the right-wing AIPAC, becoming the only top-tier presidential candidate to fail to do so. I read Secretary Clinton's statement before AIPAC. I heard virtually no discussion at all about the needs of the Palestinian people, almost none in that speech. Clinton responded by citing her own record as Secretary of State, where she held talks between Israelis and Palestinians. Israel added 100,000 settlers, a testament to how ineffective those talks were in the time frame where she was Secretary of State. At the same debate, he railed against Israel's conduct of the war in Gaza as a disproportionate to the threat and risked alienating large pro-Israel constituency in New York. Clinton took no such risk. Instead, she claimed that Hamas fighters hide in civilian garb and declined to criticize Israel's conduct in the war. And the reality of the matter is, most people have this attitude. And that's why I manage my expectations from American congresspersons, by the way. This is it. This is what it is. I found you on Jason's stream and slowly you've grown on me. I feel like my views have changed a lot if I actually listen to what you say and not just the clips people post. Yes, that is. Thank you for being open-minded. Thank you for being open-minded and being in here and actually listening to what I have to say. W chatter. Listening to W on. 2017, he hired Matt Duss, notable for being a dissenting voice in the issue, former president of Foundation for Middle East Peace. He testified before the Democratic Party's platform committee. Matt Duss, I should have Matt Duss on soon. In that testimony, he called on the party to embrace an end to the Israeli blockade to Gaza, recognize Israeli settlements as an obstacle to peace, and adopt a generally more even-handed approach to the conflict. Sanders also met with Issa Amro, famous Palestinian activist. In an interview, Amro said he offered nothing but praise for Sanders. You are my hero. If I was an American, I would campaign for you to win the election, the activist said. He told the senator. He was also the first senator to speak up against recent Israeli attacks against protesters in Gaza in April, calling the killings tragic. It is the right of all people to protest for a better future without a violent response. So, this is a Jason W. Yeah, Jason W. So, just so people understand, while I have a very different approach to Israel and a very different opinion of Israel than Bernie Sanders himself, Bernie Sanders still is further to the left than the overwhelming majority of Congress, if not damn near entirety of Congress, with some notable exceptions. And while my expectations is for Bernie to be significantly more loud about Israeli war crimes, the Israeli genocide, I'm not going to cast aside people who I think can use the formative position that they have, the position of authority that they have, the platform that they have, as long as they are still going to use that for at least setting up hurdles in front of this administration at a time when this administration is trying to actively deport every single fucking pro-Palestinian voice in the country. You might have a disagreement with that. This doesn't mean that I'm oblivious to Bernie Sanders' positions on Israel. You might have thought that that was the case. But the reality of the matter is, if you're comparing like Bernie Sanders' liberal Zionism to someone like Ethan Klein's, or maybe even saying Bernie Sanders' liberal Zionism is more damaging than Ethan Klein's liberal Zionism because he's in a position of fucking power, you're out of your fucking mind. You have to grade people on what position they occupy in society. It's that simple. Like, Bernie Sanders has significantly less smoke, regardless of his liberal Zionist position, for the pro-Palestinian cause than a fucking YouTuber who has no reason to be this fucking unconditionally pro-Israel and actively trying to deplatform people. It's that simple. Ethan is irrelevant while Bernie's an actual politician. Yes, Bernie is an actual liberal Zionist politician who does not mind platforming someone like myself who is considered a radical anti-Zionist, whereas Ethan is a YouTuber who is actively working to deplatform not just myself, but every other fucking pro-Palestinian person. What the fuck? He's doing canary mission shit. What are you talking about? When the overwhelming majority of American politicians are either directly championing the Trump administration's nefarious, dangerous agenda of undermining freedom of speech and due process in an effort to target every pro-Palestinian dissenting voice for no crime at all other than hurting Israel's feelings, I am not going to attack one of the few fucking politicians, one of the few politicians that is speaking out against it. Of course, I will demand that they do more, but that's it. Yeah. He calls it Netanyahu's illegal war. Here's your reaction to Bernie rally.
Things that I even heard from the crowd and also in the chat that was like fairly common throughout the entire process was like, what do we do? What do we do? Because like beyond the platitudes, I think we're at a time and place where I think the people want more than just statements. They want action. They want to be directed. They want to be directed towards a common goal. Because like, I think in messaging campaigns, there's like, or in movements in general, movement building, there's like an awareness phase. And then past the awareness phase, there's like the action phase. And I feel like people are aware that time is running out. So they want action, understandably. Like they want action in terms of like what to do in the short term. All the things that I even heard from the
This is an important point. The erosion of freedom of speech when it comes to criticizing Israeli government policy has been happening for a while. Students can denounce the U.S. government freely, but certain criticisms of Israeli government policy can get you deported. Madness. That's what Tommy Vitor said. Quote retweeting Youssef Munayer. Every anti-BDS law contributed to this. Every effort to redefine criticism of Israel's anti-Semitism contributed to this. This is the point of it all. Weaponizing the state to silence dissent against Israel. And it won't just stay at Israel. If you think that this is going to... Not the people in this community, you guys are obviously more quote-unquote woke, but if you think that, and by the way, send me Bernie's tweet on Remeza Öztürk. I'm sure he's stated something about that. Trump's move toward authoritarianism continues. A Turkish student at Tufts University was snatched by a group of mass DHS agents. Why? She wrote an op-ed critical of Israel's war against the Palestinian people. Together, we must stop Trump's political persecution of dissidents. Here's Bernie on Mahmoud Khalil. Trump is trying to deport a Columbia University student who has been a permanent resident in the U.S. since she was 7. Or no, not Mahmoud Khalil. This is the Korean American student. Her crime, attending a protest against the war in Gaza. No, Mr. President, this is democracy. You can't exile political dissidents, not in the United States. It's funny because here he says Israel's war against the Palestinian people, but then here he says, you know, against a war in Gaza. That's the problem. Like, yes, he won't. If he has called it a genocide, I have not heard it. Okay, and that is what it is. Okay, it is not a war. It is a genocide. And in this instance, it does matter. It certainly fucking matters. Israel's an apartheid state. Israel's doing a genocide. It is not simply Benjamin Netanyahu's illegal war. It is one that is a war of exterminationist principle. And given the fact that Bernie Sanders has been considered a radical his whole fucking political career and is literally 900 years old, it's not like he's worried about winning his reelection. He has used ethnic cleansing. Is that close enough? Yeah. So at times he says he replaces Israel with Netanyahu, and at other times he says it's Israel, right? Ultimately, beyond the aesthetics, it is obvious, yes, that Bernie Sanders still has a liberal Zionist leaning, a liberal Zionist tendency. Having said that, he also happens to be one of the only fucking congresspersons out there who is actively trying to craft bills to stop Israel from getting weapons. So what am I supposed to do? Okay? That's it. Like that's it. You got any other allies? You got other fucking congresspersons actively petitioning their fellow congressional members to try to veto weapons going to fucking Saudi Arabia, fucking Israel? Bernie's doing that. So I'm not going to fucking yell at the one guy or, you know, the collective total of like 10 guys, really, mostly women, that you know, they're bad and wrong when I got bigger fish to fry, like, you know, people with no motion, like fucking Richie Torres, all the way to people with a lot of motion, like Chuck Schumer. This was before we even arrive at the fucking dildos on the Republican side of Congress, like Josh Hawley. That's it. And it's not like I have been shy about my opinions, even at the fucking DNC, even when I'm talking to senators and other congresspersons. Like I said straight to Ro Khanna's face that Israel's doing a fucking genocide and is an apartheid state. Like, what do you mean? It's not something that I shelter my opinion on. Okay? How can they call it anybody on the actual left when we're in a fascist regime? This is literally the argument of Palestinians rejecting Hamas. Look at where they are. What?
Mark Kelly posted, you give it out, in other words. Democratic Arizona Senator Mark Kelly posted on X about his trip to Ukraine to push for continuing to send U.S. weapons and support there. And you posted that he was a traitor. Well, why do that?
Well, I think somebody should care about the interests of the United States above the interests of another country.
I'm going to do dual loyalty tropes, but for Elon Musk and South Africa. I'm going to do powerful Jewish puppeteers tropes, but for Elon Musk and South African billionaires, which is, by the way, not a trope. It's real. Elon Musk is doing that. He is literally a fucking billionaire in the White House, which is so crazy because stupid ass fucking American neo-Nazis will literally just be like, oh yeah, it's the Jews. And it's like, dude, he's using the government like a fleshlight. What are you talking about? He's there every day, his ugly ass face, wearing his fucking shitty suit with a t-shirt underneath it that says like colonize Mars. Going around being like, oh, look at me, I'm on ketamine. And you motherfuckers don't even care about that shit. You'd rather fight invisible battles against the hidden international Jewry or some shit. He's doing it. He's doing the thing that you think Jews are doing. He's literally doing it. And it's not even like hidden. It's so fucking stupid. God, Americans with their fucking peasant brain, dude. I can't stand it.
And sure. If they don't, they're a traitor.
Yeah, but he's a decorated veteran, a former astronaut, a sitting U.S. senator.
It doesn't mean it's okay for him to put the interests of another country above America.
Obviously, there are some Republicans who think supporting Ukraine is the right thing still, but there is a battle back and forth about how do you think it comes to an end?
Well,
Who's crying in the background?
I think there will be a negotiated peace, and the thing that we should be concerned about is we should have empathy for the thousands of people that are dying every day in trenches, for no movement in.
Oh, yeah. On fuck you. Anyway,
Jewish
here.
identity.
Rabbi?
I must say, you are revered on one side of the aisle and respected on the other side of the aisle for the strength of your convictions. You do not say dispassionate statements. So just like I believe we have to respect the right of everyone to their opinion, I believe the Prime Minister is a democratically elected official and is entitled to his opinion. Do I think it is anti-Semitic to criticize him? I don't think so. If you criticize somebody who's Jewish, that's not anti-Semitic. If you criticize the fact that they're Jewish,
Right,
or use that to criticize something, that's anti-Semitic.
Dr. Small, briefly, we don't have a lot of time.
So again, I would agree with the rabbi. What you said is not anti-Semitic, but what I would say with great respect is that we have to flip the equation. I think instead of blaming the victim or looking to the victim of Hamas, of the Muslim Brotherhood, we have to understand the ideology at work that's confronting
I don't think there's any
Israel.
debate up here that Hamas is a terrorist organization. What they did on October 7th is beyond disgusting. Rabbi Saperstein.
No, I don't think it is anti-Semitic if you say it, or if people on college campuses say it. But on college campuses, there are too many instances in which those kinds of
Yeah, bro, I'm telling you, I'm telling you, man, we're all going to prison. Like, listen, the deportations will not stop until everyone's like, we love Israel. It's the best.
political statements are mixed with rank hatred against Jews, and that steps over the line into anti-Semitism.
Mr. Stern.
Senator Sanders, that statement, that opinion alone is not anti-Semitic.
Okay, now I need your help on something else. I have never met George Soros in my life, to the best of my knowledge. I don't believe I've ever received a nickel in campaign funding from Mr. Soros. But I think, as all of you know, Soros has been a stereotype, a manifestation of anti-Semitism all over the world. Yes? Warren? Yes. So when we talk about anti-Semitism, one of the tropes that has always been used, Prodigals of Zion, is that there's this mysterious underground group of zillionaire.
Is that what's his face? That's the guy behind him that put that up, by the way, is Warren Gunnels. Okay? Who sends me, I think, an auto DM basically every day of his latest tweets, hoping that I retweet them. I'm not calling him out. He's a wonderful person. He's Bernard's big time homie. Minority Staff Director for Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, ranking member. Okay? So Warren Gunnels, for those of you who don't know, as a Bernie staffer, is big time homie of Bernie's. He is a former private healthcare insurance CEO or executive who is obviously very much pro socialized healthcare, Medicare for all. And the only reason why I'm bringing it up is because I think Bernie loves him, because I see him around Bernie all the time, more than anyone else. He's his consigliere.
Jews who are manipulating the whole world, right? Is that the trope? Okay. This, from the Holocaust Memorial Museum, is something that appeared in Hungary, a Hungarian anti-Semitic publication. Jews, puppeteers, right? Familiar with that trope? Mm-hmm. This is from a Donald Trump campaign email. George Soros, puppeteer. Biden is the puppet being manipulated. About it, Ms. Gamble, does that look to you like an anti-Semitic trope?
I think that there's no question that there is a relationship when you look at the two images that would cause that question to be raised. Again, I think context is key.
Rabbi?
George,
Briefly, I want to hear from everybody. Yes or no? Is that do you think that has anti-Semitic overtones?
I think that George Soros is Jewish, although he doesn't really identify closely with the community. 1 minute?
No, I don't have 1 minute. I got 17 seconds, sir.
Okay, 17 seconds.
Is this anti-Semitic?
Very simply, he's being criticized. He's Jewish. I don't know that he's being criticized because he's Jewish.
All right, Dr. Simone?
Dude, this kind of shit is so funny. Yeah, he's well, I'm right wing, so I think, yeah, you can criticize Netanyahu. That's not anti-Semitic. But as a right wing guy, it's hard. It's hard for me to say that this image that is identical to the image from the Holocaust Museum is actually anti-Semitic, because if I say that, then people are going to yell at me. Also, college campus students are Nazis for saying Israel's an apartheid state doing a genocide. How can you sincerely entertain both of those positions at the same time? Oh, Jewish college student wearing a keffiyeh, that's neo-Nazism right there. That's the modern swastika. George Soros puppeteer images? I don't know. He's too woke for me. That's crazy.
I would say very briefly, we're living in a time where the Democratic center is under attack from the extreme right, the extreme left, and radical Islam.
I asked you a question. Does this look like an anti-Semitic trope?
Yes.
Rabbi Saperstein?
Yes.
Mr. Stern?
Anti-Semitism is two things, in its essence: a conspiracy theory that Jews try to harm humanity, what goes wrong in the world. That picture is anti-Semitic. Orban was using it recently as well, clearly anti-Semitic.
Okay, thank you.